What's up guys, Joey here of YugaTech, and yes, this is it. This is our top smartphones under 25,000 pesos for late 2019. So just like the last two videos, our parameters have changed slightly since our mid-2019 lists. Now the phones included in this list are only from 2019. Prices are between 15,000 pesos and 25,000 pesos. They're officially or readily available in the Philippines. Again, ranking is based on our educated opinion based on our time spent with these devices, so take our rankings with a grain of salt because at the end of the day, the money is yours. So coming in at the number 10 spot is the Samsung Galaxy A50s. So the A50s is just a minor refresh from the A50 released earlier this year. It's basically got better cameras. So coming in with a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED 1080p display, it's also got an Exynos 9611 chipset. For cameras, you get a 48-megapixel main sensor, 8-megapixel ultra-wide sensor, 5-megapixel depth sensor, and for the front camera, it's a 32-megapixel sensor. You get a pretty big 4,000 mAh battery with support for 15-watt fast charging, and for software, of course, it's the crowd favorite for Samsung users, One UI. The Samsung Galaxy A50s is priced at 18,990 pesos, that's for 6GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage. At number 9, we have the Oppo Reno 2F. So the Reno 2F is kind of the spiritual successor to the Oppo F11 Pro from earlier this year. It comes in at 6.53 inches, it's a Super AMOLED display at 1080p. You get your MediaTek Helio P70 chipset. For cameras, a 48-megapixel main sensor, 8-megapixel ultra-wide, 2-megapixel monochrome sensor, and 2-megapixel depth sensor. This phone does get an all-screen display thanks to that 16-megapixel pop-up front camera, which unfortunately, even if it's part of the Reno series, it's not a shark fin. Anyway, for battery, you get a 4,000 mAh cell with support for the really fast VOOC 3.0 flash charging. Now, the Oppo Reno 2F will set you back 19,990 pesos. At number 8, we have the Samsung Galaxy A70. So yeah, the A70, what else can you say? It's a solid premium mid-range Samsung device. So this one's a pretty big boy. It's a 6.7-inch phone. That's a Super AMOLED 1080p display. You get a Snapdragon 675 chipset. For cameras, you get a 32-megapixel main, 8-megapixel ultra-wide, and 5-megapixel depth. That's for the rear. For the front, it's a 32-megapixel sensor. Like I said, it's a big phone. You get an equally big 4,500 mAh battery with support for 25-watt fast charging. You get Dolby Atmos support. You get One UI. And for pricing, it'll set you back 22,990 pesos. That's for 6GB of RAM plus 128GB of internal storage. At number 7, we have the Xiaomi Mi 9 SE. Now this one is perfect for small phone numbers. It comes in at just 5.97 inches, which by today's standards is small. That's also a Super AMOLED 1080p panel. For chipset, we have the Snapdragon 712. For cameras, 48-megapixel main, 13-megapixel ultra-wide, 8-megapixel telephoto. You also get a 20-megapixel front camera. Unfortunately, since this phone is on the smaller side, it's a smaller battery as well. 3,070 mAh to be exact. It also has support for 18-watt fast charging. Now there are two variants. Official prices are as follows. 15,990 pesos for the 6GB of RAM plus 64GB of storage variant, or 17,990 pesos for the 6GB of RAM plus 128GB of internal storage variant. Now, these are the official prices, but we've definitely seen them for cheaper over at Lazada, so check it out over there. At number 6, we have the Vivo V17 Pro. The V17 Pro, it's pretty much the baby next 3. It's super feature-packed. It would probably be higher up on this list if it had a better chipset and a cheaper price tag. So it comes in at 6.44 inches. Again, that's a Super AMOLED display at 1080p. Chipset is the Snapdragon 675. Cameras, a 48-megapixel main, 8-megapixel ultra-wide, 2-megapixel macro lens, and 2-megapixel depth sensor. For front cameras, you have 2. It's a 32-megapixel main selfie camera and an 8-megapixel ultra-wide selfie camera. Again, I call this the next 3 because of that center-placed wider pop-up camera setup. You get a 4,100 mAh battery with support for 18-watt dual-engine fast charging. And yeah, this guy will set you back 21,999 pesos. That's for 8GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage. At number 5, we have the Realme XT. So the Realme 5 Pro may have been the top choice for the under 15,000 list, but come on. The Realme XT is Realme's best mid-range phone this year. It's got a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED 1080p display. Chipset is the Snapdragon 712. For cameras, you get a super high-resolution 64-megapixel main rear sensor, plus 8-megapixel ultra-wide, 2-megapixel macro, and 2-megapixel depth. And up front, it's a 16-megapixel selfie camera. You get a big battery as well at 4,000 mAh with support for super fast VOOC 3.0 flash charging. And this guy will set you back 16,990 pesos for the 8GB of RAM plus 128GB of internal storage. At number 4, we have the Xiaomi Mi 9T. Now, it's okay to disagree with me in the comments down below, but what I say is that the Mi 9T is the best mid-range phone currently. That's not a flagship killer. It's almost exactly like its Pro version, of course minus the chipset and the 27-watt fast charging. You get a 6.39-inch 1080p Super AMOLED display. Powering it is a Snapdragon 730G chipset, which is a pretty good mid-range chipset. For cameras, you get a 48-megapixel Sony IMX582 main sensor, 13-megapixel ultra-wide lens, and 8-megapixel telephoto lens. Of course, just like its bigger brother, you get that pop-up light-up 20-megapixel front camera. For battery, it's 4,000 mAh of capacity with support for 18-watt fast charging. Now, this guy has gone through a price drop recently. So the 6GB plus 64GB variant will cost you 15,490 pesos, while the 6GB plus 128GB variant will cost you 17,490 pesos. Coming in at number 3, we have the Huawei Nova 5T. Now this one is also one of our favorites. It's Huawei's very own flagship killer. Coming in at 6.26 inches, unfortunately it only has an IPS screen, though at 1080p as well. You got the powerful Kirin 980 chipset. For cameras, you got a 48-megapixel Sony IMX586, 16-megapixel ultra-wide, 2-megapixel macro, and 2-megapixel depth sensor. Up front for selfies, you get neither a notch or a pop-up camera. This guy has got a punch hole. It's 32 megapixels of resolution for the front camera. For battery, you got a 3,750 mAh capacity with Huawei Supercharge. That's the 22.5 watt variety. And yeah, generally the Nova 5T, you got that flagship specs, but for design, it generally feels more like a mid-range phone. Anyway, for price, it's 18,990 pesos. That's for 8GB of RAM plus 128GB of internal storage. At number 2, we have the Xiaomi Mi 9. Now, I think the Xiaomi Mi 9 deserves a little bit more credit. It's probably mostly overshadowed by the Mi 90 Pro or K20 Pro, but nonetheless, it's still a great Xiaomi flagship device. It's coming in with a 6.39-inch Super AMOLED 1080p display. You get a flagship Snapdragon 855 chipset. For cameras, a 48-megapixel main sensor, 16-megapixel ultra-wide, 12-megapixel telephoto. This guy's got a notch, so up front for selfies, it's a 20-megapixel shooter. Battery is on the smaller side, 3,300 mAh, but unlike any of the other phones on this list, you do get 20-watt wireless charging. Now this guy's got two price variants, 22,990 pesos for 6GB plus 64GB, and 24,990 pesos for 6GB plus 128GB. And for the second time this year, taking the #1 spot for this list is the Xiaomi Mi 90 Pro, aka the Redmi K20 Pro. This phone is the definitive value for money phone for 2019. It's kinda like the Pocophone F1 of 2019, if you could say so. Again, comes in at 6.39 inches, Super AMOLED 1080p. Again, Snapdragon 855, the flagship chipset. For cameras, 48-megapixel Sony IMX586 main sensor, 13-megapixel ultra-wide, 8-megapixel telephoto. Now this one has a pop-up light-up selfie camera, which we've grown to love. That's a 20-megapixel resolution for the front shooter. For battery, pretty big at 4,000 mAh with support for 27-watt fast charging. Other things, it's got that really nice, cool, edgy, fiery design at the back. It's the K20 Pro, aka the Mi 90 Pro. Now, the K20 Pro is not officially available in the Philippines. The Mi 90 Pro is the one you're gonna be able to buy in stores. Now, it has two variants, 18,990 pesos for the 6GB plus 64GB, or 20,490 pesos for the 6GB plus 128GB. So that pretty much wraps it up for this list. Again, guys, take these rankings with a grain of salt. I mean, I guess they're all pretty good anyway because they did make it to the top 10. But again, grain of salt, rankings, at the end of the day, the money is yours. But if you have any other phones that you think should be part of this list, help your fellow viewers out, leave them in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like, subscribe to our channel for more content, hit the bell icon to see future uploads, and be sure to visit YugaTech.com for the latest tech news and reviews. This has been Joey, and I'll see you guys in the next one.